Part of the full stack development process includes creating a mockup or a prototype of some sort. So the importance of this is extreme because if you simply just hop into a project and start doing the HTML and CSS to structure a layout, usually the end result is going to be ugly. So it's always easiest to first design it in some type of graphics application. So in this course, we're going to use Adobe XD or Experience Design, which is an app and website prototyping app. So what we're going to do is first design a home page, and then when a user clicks on one of the tutorial listings that's a part of our CodePost.net project, we'll also design a page that lists out the details. And then also finally a third page for when people want to post a tutorial through a form. And then at the end, we'll create an interactive prototype where you can actually click on the elements in the prototype and you'll see how the page transitions work and how we intend for them to work in the final result. All right, so let's get started.
All right, so I launched Adobe XD or Experience Design, and here we have with the initial screen making us choose to open something recent or start a new project. So what we want to do is start here with a web 1920 by 1080 version right here. So we'll just click it, and I just pause to fit it within the recording area. And I'm going to hold Alt and my mouse scroll wheel to zoom up a bit here. Hit the space bar and left click to drag. And if we click on this little title right here, Web 1920, what we can do is we can adjust the artboard as needed. So we have our width and height over here. So if we simply left click and drag up or down, we can adjust these values as we wish. And what I'm trying to do is basically just get it to extend to a good portion so it fills out my screen just for recording purposes. So for me, I'm recording at 1920 by 1080. So this happens to be 2168 by 1369. As long as you have the proportions pretty close to the 1920 by 1080, you'll be fine. Again, this is just a prototype. All right, and then also another thing that we want to adjust is the viewport height. If you want, that's what this little dashed line here is. You can make it even with this if you want, and I think I will as well. Okay, so the first thing I want to establish is the background color. Again, we select on the artboard here to establish the fill right here. Now, I personally really like this, a very desaturated dark blue. So if I click on this, the way you can find and the way I navigated and found it initially is just to go to this blue over here, kind of close to this teal color, and just come down here near the desaturated dark portion. So the specific color code that I ended up using is 2A3136. So we'll hit enter. Okay. Next, we want to import the SVG that we created for the logo. So we'll come over here. We're going to import and choose our logo.svg. All right, great. So now let's scale this down just a little bit. And I'm going to drag it up near the left corner, maybe right around here will be pretty good. Now, so the design I'm intending on is going to be centered, something like this. So we'll just keep that in mind that we want roughly an even amount of space on the right and left. All right, so we'll just pull this down just a bit using my keyboard down arrow key. And next, I'm not really planning to have a navigation just because this is a pretty simple project. So what I'm going to do instead is just have a button called Post Tutorial right here, a call to action. So I'm going to take the type tool. It doesn't really matter where it's at because we are going to adjust it. And it's going to be Post Tutorial. All right, so I'm going to increase the font size by left clicking and dragging up. And we're going to go ahead and make it this color right here, our accent color. Now, something that's real handy is if we take this and we go to fill, and we can come over here, actually the eyedropper, and we can get the exact color right there. And then we click on this and click this little plus, and I'll add it to the swatches so that we can quickly reuse this and access it when designing other user interface elements. All right, then next we're going to go ahead and take a rectangle tool and draw it around it. Now, of course, we can't see it, but we'll fix that. We don't want to fill here. And instead, I'll have a border, and this border will be our accent color. Additionally, we also want a border radius, just slightly. And that looks pretty good. So let me go ahead and zoom up here just so we can show you, I can show you what it looks like. So now we can just select the type and position it with our keyboard arrow key. All right. All right, this is what things look like so far, and they're pretty good. So get a good idea for positioning. Yeah, right there looks good. All right, great. Let me bring it down just a bit. All right, so now in the next, let's go ahead and draw, or design rather, this section right here. And we're going to focus on that in the next video. I'll see you then. All right, so now what we want to do is design the actual tutorial listings that are going to show up upon the app loading. So this is going to be, what is essentially the home page or the home screen. All right, so what we want to do is we're going to make this in such a way that there's 3 or 4 different panels that are featuring each individual or latest tutorial. All right, so to do that, zoom up here just a bit. I'm going to come down. We want a decent amount of white space between our elements. Sometimes when you get a little bit too close, it really clutters things. You want your design to breathe, especially on the desktop version. So I'm going to draw out something roughly right around this size. Now, of course, we can always adjust these and make adjustments as needed in terms of the width so that they really fit in with the size of our layout. So we kind of just want to eyeball this so that 3 of these can fit across. Temporarily, we can choose repeat grid and just drag it out. Look at that, it's almost correct there in terms of the size. But that doesn't really matter because we can also scale this down as needed. So if I take this one, take this one, then we can scale so it's even. So if you look in the very right, it's aligning to the right side of the post tutorial button along this edge. All right, so I'm going to back up just a little bit, just so we're here and it's no longer a part of the repeat grid. And now I'm going to choose a color for this. So do we want really this absolute white? I kind of don't like that. I think it's just too much contrast that's coming out, and it just kind of breaks the flow of the layout. So what I want to do is just make a very slightly lighter color of this background. So to do that, we'll come over here, and we don't need a border, by the way, so we can uncheck that. And we can real quickly get our background color and then just choose a slightly lighter color. Sort of almost like that. Now I chose a very specific one when I was developing the app earlier, and I'm going to paste that in here. Actually, wow, I think that was the same exact color code. What are the chances of that happening? All right, so it's 363E45. And that's the color code that we want. Hit enter. All right, and now what we want to do is create the title portion of it. So I'm going to zoom up here just so we can get a good look of what's happening. So for the title, I'm going to left click, drag out maybe right around here. I'm planning on having a little circular arrow that can be clicked to bring you to that particular resource. So creating a to-dos app with the mean stack, either for. So this is just some type of bogus title essentially. So now for the color here, make it white. And the size obviously needs drastically increased. And so we'll scale this down. And I'm going to be using a Google font called Railway. So over here, if I type in Railway, we'll find it. And I want this variation right down here, which is going to be, we'll see, light. Yeah, light. Now, where can you find that? If you just go to Google and type in download Railway font, this is the first result. You can download TTF and install it. All right. And looking at this as is, I think we can go a little bit less, maybe about 40. And also we can increase the line height. So I'm going to just drag this up slightly. That way it's a little bit easier to read. So again, I think I'm going to come down in size just a little bit. Yeah, that looks good. All right, great. So now on the right-hand side, we're going to focus this on that little circle I was talking about at the end of this lesson. So let's also focus here on a description section. So with the type tool, I'm going to left click, drag out an area roughly right around here. All right. So I'm just going to hit ASDF real quick here just for a second because we're going to get up a site, and that is lipsum.com. Here's the address, and it just gives you some lorem ipsum text that you can grab real quick and integrate as place filler text. So I'm just going to copy that, paste it in. Okay, so we want to make some adjustments here. First, it's too small, so I'm going to increase the size. By the way, let's change our Railway font real quickly. And we'll make this light. The size, just a tad bit smaller to around 26. And then also, we want to increase the line height to around 39 right there. All right, so looking at that, that's pretty good so far. And now we're going to have a call to action button, which is going to be a more info button. We're going to style it the same as this button over here. So Control C, Control V, drag that guy over here and scale it down holding Shift roughly right around there. So this is what your design should look like so far. We're going to change this here to simply more info. And we'll drag this guy in. Oops. There we go. All right, perfect. Now let's go ahead and design that little circle real quick. So I've hopped back into Adobe Illustrator and I've opened up our logo.svg file. Real quickly, I'm going to save this as a new file. We'll call this here icon, or let's call it just external. I temporarily paused and I got into my rate project folder here based on the lesson. So external, we'll save that, hit OK. Okay, so the reason I opened up the logo is just so that we can create a certain similar aesthetic in terms of the arrow that we create. And so this helps sometimes in terms of creating an overall consistent type of aesthetic. So what do I mean exactly? Well, we see we have a certain angle of our slant here. This isn't quite 45 degrees. I think it's a little bit higher. But what we'll do is I'm going to right click and ungroup this. And then we have this one isolated. We can delete that. And what I want to do is simply take our rectangle tool and then hold Shift, select both of them, get out our favorite tool ever, the Pathfinder, minus front, right click, we can ungroup this so we can delete this. So now we just have this certain slash essentially. So what we can do now is we need to create an arrow out of this. So we want the same thickness. So I'm going to hit Control C, Control F, and that creates a duplicate on top. I'm going to take our free transform tool and skew it, eyeball as close to straight up and down as I can. And unfortunately, it doesn't align to or really allow you to know where that's at. Actually, another method of doing this, which, sorry about that, kind of a brain fart there, is just to simply take the rectangle tool and draw out right there. Perfect. Now we have the exact width that we need. So now we can come down, now we can come down here. And then also hit Control C, Control F. We're going to make sure we can rotate it, hold Shift, so that's 100% on a 180 degree angle. All right, and then what I want to do is take this here, this anchor point with the direct selection tool. We want it to follow the same angle right there. Same thing with this one up top, except we're going to drag everything down because it's a little bit shorter. All right, so now it doesn't really look very good, and there's a couple issues with that that are contributing to that. First, this is kind of isn't aligned here exactly in the center of these two, and also when we skew it, we change the width of this, because if you skew it enough, you'll see how much thinner it will become. All right, so that's what's happening there. So we're going to make a few adjustments. So first, we're going to take the direct selection tool. We're going to move this up. I'm no longer kind of interested in maintaining the same angle. I realized that was kind of a bad judgment call, so that's okay. Now I'm taking the direct selection tool. You just left click and drag, or the add anchor point tool, sorry. And then we're going to create just 2 anchor points here. And I'm going to drag this one, hold Shift and select this one. And I'm going to drag it down to increase the thickness. All right, and then I'm going to drag this one, let's see here, straight up. So that's in line with this down here. All right, so now it's looking better. And so really just required those 2 steps to get it looking pretty good. So now if I could probably stand to move these so that's more in line with that angle. All right, that's looking pretty good. All right, so it's still unique enough, and I think it does follow the general aesthetic. Looking at this, I may want to move this over just slightly. All right, I like that. So now what we'll do is take the Ellipse Tool, and we're going to come right in the center, which isn't quite the center yet. We're going to drag that here to the bottom. We're going to take these 3, we're going to join them, and then we'll make it white. And we'll scale it in just a little bit. All right, so I like that right there. All right, and one thing I'm going to do, instead of making it white, we're going to make it the same color as our background of the website, so, or the app rather. So what I can do is just take this color code right there, copy. By default, it has it selected, and then we'll change it here and hit OK. So now let's go ahead real quick and take our artboard, get it scaled in. Scale it in. Yeah, sorry about that. It was a little bit tricky. I kind of ended up going a different route than originally planned, but that's okay. All right, so now we'll save that XVG. We're going to bring back XD. We'll go ahead and import. Here's our external graphic. All right, and we're gonna stick it, yeah, right around there. Let's zoom up a little bit. Oops. Right around there seems pretty good. All right. And then next, once we have all this done, this entire panel, we'll take everything and hit Control G and then repeat grid. So now we can drag right. And obviously it's extending too far. So before we address that, let's drag this down 3 columns right there, or 3 rows rather. And then what we can do is increase this to even size as well. All right, that looks pretty good. And now at the end, let's go ahead and click Ungroup Grid and hold Shift, and we can scale these in so that the right side's lining up to the end of our post tutorial section. All right, so that looks pretty good right there. All right, so I wanted to increase this just a bit. So to do that, just to show this bottom portion here, and we'll get rid of a couple just to show what it might look like naturally. Also adjust the bottom portion for the same height for the viewport. Oops. Okay, great. So now if I hit play, whoa, got real big on my screen. Scale it down here. There we go. Good stuff. Okay. Now in the next video, we're going to focus on a details listing, or what happens when you click on one of these panels.